I have some words to share with you tonight. This, I confess, is surreal, a very different kind of Holy Day experience for me. I'm sure it is for you. There are a lot of changes going on. Our services, the life of our congregation, how we make Rosh Hashanah happen in the first place. I'm at one angle, Holly is on the other side at a totally different angle, so we're speaking nowhere in any kind of line close to one another. It can be overwhelming for you and for us. Our hope has been to provide enough opportunities for you to connect as you need. Some to services, others to a blog, maybe online activities, questions for reflection to consider at a time when you're ready and able. This pandemic has challenged us to think differently about the work that needs to be done in congregational life. And what is that work? To build a community of meaning and belonging, to take care of one another, to inspire a call for justice, to be a safe place, to learn, to grow together, and to help each other to see. Let's talk about ritual just for a moment. Our congregation's history, the congregation has always read certain stories, certain sections from the book of Genesis consistent with Jewish tradition. The main themes that we read on Rosh Hashanah are about Sarah and Abraham finally having a child, Isaac, and also the binding of Isaac, the preparation for his sacrifice, the child they longed for, and Abraham's readiness to do it. Many Reformed congregations have made different choices regarding Rosh Hashanah's readings. For Yom Kippur, we've gone along with the Reform alternative readings for many years here at HaShem, but we kept the traditional readings for Rosh Hashanah. This year, I couldn't do it. I chose instead for us to read Bereshit, the story of creation instead, for tomorrow morning. Why? Well, I believe the Torah reflects our lives and that we can see ourselves in the text, and the Torah's essence is embedded in us, to be sure. Whatever we see in the Torah's texts, all of it, conflicts, ethics, challenges, doubts, they're all relevant for our 21st century lives. But the traditional texts of Sarah no longer dealing with infertility, of Hagar being cast out with their son Ishmael, the binding of Isaac, as I mentioned, and the ending of child sacrifice, they all have great truths and important messages in those texts, but for some, they're difficult to access on our holiest of days. Some feel like they're obtuse. Others even find them triggering. Our congregants would ask, why does God remember and intervene on behalf of Sarah but not other women? Why does their struggle with infertility end but not mine? Why does Abraham cast out his own son Ishmael? How can Abraham prepare to sacrifice Isaac, the long-awaited son he had with his beloved Sarah? I really do believe the texts have important lessons, even when we disagree with them. But this year we need to teach and preach about hope and about beginnings and resilience and hope and hope and hope. So we're joining many other Reformed congregations that for a long time have read about creation, the first day of creation, this Rosh Hashanah, because I need a creation story. I need a new beginning story renewal and change, where we bring order in the midst of chaos. And for the second day of Rosh Hashanah, again, we're not going to read the binding of Isaac and God's angel stopping Abraham's hands. No, we're going to read about how Abraham challenged God not to destroy cities filled with evil people, not to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. We're going to read about Abraham's courageous moment, his modeling for us. That's what we need this year. This year. We need to hold up examples of strength and vision and justice and compassion, even for the evil. Sometimes tradition needs to change. Now, it's not an easy thing for me to say. All of my life, I felt the Reform movement was too easygoing sometimes on the movement. My wife would tell me to lighten up when we were younger, and of course she was right. I used to think that people needed Judaism, and I still do, but not in the same way. I used to think we needed Judaism because we were Jews, because we were Jewish. Now I believe we need Judaism because it has something to say, because life is hard, it's complicated, it's amazing, it's awesome, and it's awful, and it's plain old tough. Judaism can help us appreciate life, and it can help us find a balance when things pile up. It calls us to action, and it can remind us to not disappear and become complacent. And it can remind us to be gentle with us. If Judaism is here to help find purpose, meaning, and inspiration, the text of the binding of Isaac has amazing lessons, but it's not comfort. And for me, it's not even so much inspiration. Our ancestors considered a master story of having faith in God. For me, I think we can do better. It's time for a change in our Jewish community. Maybe to rewrite our liturgy to celebrate the awe and grandeur and diminish the fear of God. Maybe to move education into classes and seminars and keep hope, love, and compassion at the center of our worship and our sermons. Bruce Feiler, he's a well-known author. He's a fifth-generation Southern Jew, although he left Savannah for Brooklyn a long time ago. He came out with another book this year. It's called Life is in the Transitions, Mastering Change at Any Age. In the book, he interviews people from all across the country and recognizes that everyone experiences something called life quakes. Life quakes. He writes about how all of us have disruptors that occur in our lives. On average, one every 12 to 18 months. This is what he writes. We manage to get through these disruptors only with minor upset to our lives. We adjust, draw on our loved ones, recalibrate our stories. But every now and then, one, or more commonly, a pileup of 2, 3, or 4. 4 of these disruptors rises to the level of truly disorienting and destabilizing us. He calls these life quakes because the damage they cause can be devastating. They are higher on the Richter scale of consequence, and their aftershocks can last for years. The average person goes through 3 to 5 of these massive reorientations in their adult lives. Their average duration, his data showed, is 5 years. When you do the math, that means that nearly half our lives are spent responding to one of these episodes. Judaism helps me with my life quakes, and I've had my share. It has always helped with our people's life quakes. In fact, it's the life quakes that have often shaped our ideas, our values, our traditions, and especially the traditions of the High Holy Day liturgy. I think our tradition has long responded to life quakes. But at a certain point, I think as we became good Americans, there's a part of us that forgot to engage in how to be Jewish or how to do Jewish. So rabbis like me would cling to tradition, hold up a copy of Fiddler on the Roof, and people would nod. I don't believe that Reform Judaism is a do-anything-you-want type of Judaism. That's a gross misunderstanding of our essence. I think there are responsibilities and obligations within our liberal orientation. I do. But where we put our emphasis, how we engage the voices of yesteryear, where we bring in new, creative, innovative, diverse voices, is how to make Judaism matter and how to make our lives in the Jewish community matter. Matterness is essential. I was introduced to this idea of matterness by a wonderful leadership coach and friend in town. His name is Larry Dressler. He showed me a book from Alison Fine. Her book is Matterness, Fearless Leadership for a Social World. And her premise is this: matterness means refocusing efforts to make sure people feel known, acknowledged, and powerful. It happens everywhere, online and on land, in the hallways, in boardrooms, and in living rooms. Matterness means asking more than telling, putting aside the old management mantras that staff are supposed to have all the answers and that working fast is the same as working smart. The changes I hope to talk to you about this year is much more than about the Torah readings, but Torah matters. The changes we make matters. It's the connections we make. It's the Torah we teach. It's the hands we hold, symbolically now, physically again, we hope in the not-too-distant future. All of our messages, formal and subtle, everything matters here. I am saying that it's time to start responding to your needs in the liturgy and prayer, rather than asking you always to meet our ancient ancestors where they were at during the Crusades. One of my favorite mentors is retiring next spring. Rabbi Billy Dreskin in New York tried to teach me when I was younger, relentlessly, I might add, to open my heart. My response to him in the late 1990s was that my job was to teach Torah. I couldn't realize that Torah is learned best through the heart, that it's transmitted best through love, that it's most inspiring when it helps us see ourselves in the text and not so far removed from it. My Rosh Hashanah message is to be open to change, not just because of a pandemic, because we have to, but because it's time. Change of how to see one's synagogue or how one's own Jewish community, from a place to belong to a place of belonging. Change of how to see one's relationship to Judaism, to build on a sense of identity and build pathways to inspiration, to live better, deeply, with gratitude and responsibility to one another. To have a sense of the divine, so we can see how we are really connected more deeply than we often realize. When I worked for Rabbi Dreskin, I will always remember one of the teachings that was particularly poignant for me this holiday season. He wrote 20 years ago this little piece of a sermon. He said, "This morning we're joined together, as have our ancestors for 1,000 years and more, and reading the words of Avinu Malkeinu, asking God to fill our hands with blessing, to let the new year be a good year for us, and to inscribe us for a blessing in the book of life." These are good words, he said, words of hope, words of reassurance, words of optimism about the future. And many of us will leave here this morning renewed in our vision of just how rewarding life can be. But there are some here, perhaps many, for whom these words of blessing fall flat. The prayer book's thoughts of revitalization don't fully enter our hearts because somehow our hearts have been obstructed. We're unable to see, hear, or feel notions of goodwill or of positive outlook and expectation. It's not about our bodies, nor is it about our minds. It has to do with our spirits, with our souls. Somehow they've been harmed and they lie wounded. Friends, we have a lot of wounded souls out there right now. Some from your own life quakes, others from synagogues who cause pain. Others feel injured just watching the news and witnessing the state of our world as fires burn metaphorically and quite literally close to home. Some are in pain because they can't be with their loved ones at the end of life or in the midst of pain or struggle. And some are just trying to figure out how to make it work as they continue to work from home and try and raise young children, or they're in a home alone. I hope the response to life quakes and traumas and wounds and loneliness and feeling lost is reflected in this next message. Rabbi Alexander Schindler, a remarkable human being who served as president of the Union of American Hebrew Congregations until his death in the year 2000. I shared this with some of our board members about how I hope we can move our community forward this year. He wrote, "Our lives are a wilderness, uncharted and unpredictable, untimely deaths, unexpected blows, unsuitable matches, unfulfilled dreams. And yet by gathering our heartaches into a house of worship, we find something transformative happening. Our sorrows become windows of compassion. Our sorrows become windows of compassion, paths through the wilderness, hewed and marked by past generations, give us our bearings. Patterns of meaning and significance emerge. We are moved from self-pity to love. Our individual heartbeats merge with the pulse of all humankind. Suddenly, we no longer tremble like an uprooted reed. This next stage of our journey, not because of this pandemic, but certainly hastened by it, needs to help us move toward matterness, change, care, and innovation. It's time to invest in us as a caring community, a safe place with ritual that is dynamic, learning that is compelling for all ages. inclusion that is more than a committee but a truth, a sense for homecoming for all who enter our tent, no matter where they're from, how they identify, the color of their skin, their journey to Judaism, if they come wounded or strong, affluent or struggling. I believe that we can be that place. And the sermons and messages over the next 10 days of R are going to reflect all of these themes. Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful. This world of yours is not easy, but you have provided us with incredible reservoirs of strength. Some are within us. Others are provided by the people who surround us. So let us be the Messiah for one person during our lives. Let us be one of those well springs. Let us provide the love and nourishment and care for one another as you have intended all along. Help us see that Jewish life, tradition, and ritual, ethics, and ideas are just tools to help us live deeply with integrity. Malei Yadeinu, Birchotecha, fill our hands with blessing. Chadesh Aleinu Shana Tova, let the new year be a good year for us. Kotzvenu b'sefer chaim tovim, and give us the ability to inscribe our own names for a blessing in the book of life. Ken yehi ratzon. May it be God's will.